Hey everyone, today we are going to look at how to create your DIY entry mat. Your take-home project materials that you would have received would have included your choice of paint. You will have two 16-ounce bottles of paint in your color that you chose. For my example today, I just have two smaller bottle colors just for the purpose of demonstration. You will also have received a couple different set types of brushes. You will either have a foam brush or you will have a stiff bristle brush, and that's about a 1/2 inch brush. So you will have two of each depending with your colors, and you can choose whichever option you want. You will also have a entry mat, which is down here below, plain entry one, and then you will also receive a cardboard stencil. Now this stencil is based on the design that you chose, and you're going to also notice that there is a little bit of a glaze to it. It is sealed for like water protection, so it should better hold and stay with your paint. Now, we figured this the poster board stencil is going to be better, easier for you than the vinyl, so that's why we chose this option. Okay. Let's talk about a couple of different things with it. I also, for this project, brought in a paper plate so I can put my paint on it. We're also going to look at where this is going to fit in the fair if you plan to bring it to the fair. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of move my paint off to the side for now. Your mat is an 18, oh, I just lost it, an 18 by 30-inch mat. Okay, so 18 by 30 inches. You have the ability, and most of your stencils essentially are going to come in a couple of different pieces. So if you have the hello option or the flowers, they should be in a single piece. However, if you chose to have the name or the baseball piece, you might have a baseball diamond piece that hangs off to the side plus the words, or for the name it'll have your name and then family, and those are really meant for you so that you can lay them out wherever you want to on the mat. Now in this case you're kind of looking at the bottom corner of my mat. What I'm going to do is I want to lay my mat, excuse me, it's on my desk a little funky. I want to lay my design so it's kind of in the bottom corner of the mat. Okay, so on this side over here I have about an inch or so, probably about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches off the top and a couple of inches off the bottom. If you would like to do so, something we would suggest is taping down the outside with some painter's tape or some additional tape. Okay, one thing I would do to prepare your mat for the painting is to go ahead and run a vacuum over it. These coir mats essentially have little pieces of what are like straw that kind of stick up or they will shed, and so those can get into your design. I went ahead and ran a vacuum over top of this one already, so it should be good to go. Now, I, for instance, in this case, am not going to tape this mat down, or this stencil down. I have just some heavy items I'm going to go ahead and stick on the top to kind of place it in there, because as mentioned, this is going to be a singular example. Okay. Now, looking at your design, you have the option for 2 different colors. Now, something you're going to want to think about is, where am I placing those colors and how am I going to attack this design? Now, small, simple designs like this will hold up and stand. However, if you're worried that you might get, let's say I'm going to do green in this color in the big letters and white as my highlight, I might be worried that I might get some white or another color over into my other item. So I might get white in my green or green on my white. So something you could do is put a little strip of painter's tape over the other pieces that you are not wanting to paint yet, or just be very, very careful in how you do that. I am going to go ahead and do, we're not going to worry too much about leaching underneath of these, because the paint, if it's going to go anywhere, is going to go straight down into the mat versus over and across. So for this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on a couple of these letters, but I am going to start with the white because I want my white to be, I'm going to use that brush first, and then that way it's easier, green will cover it. So I'm going to put some paint on my plate, and I'm going to go ahead and do a, foam brush for my white. So I'm going to take it, and we gave you also a big 16-ounce bottle of paint because it's going to take a good chunk of paint for this to be a thick base layer. Okay, so I'm going to want a thick layer of paint in my design to make sure that we are seeing all parts of this design. Don't be afraid to layer it on pretty thick. And also, some people in the letters, like over here on the O, we had to leave a little gap like this to make sure that this centerpiece stayed on. If you eventually want to paint all the way around and then take it off and finish the O, you can do that too. I know some people with like the names or whatever might have had some pieces that didn't go all the way there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just dab in here, and I'm probably gonna want a couple of layers. Now, like I said, this is just plain acrylic paint. This is not going to be super weather safe until you apply some weather sealant to it. So we did not put a weather sealant in your bag or in your kit just because weather sealant is not super cheap. So here at the office, we do have a Flex Seal sealant that we are going to have available. When you are done with your mat and you would like to seal it, you can come into the office and use that, and we will help you spray the clear sealant on your rug. That will also help keep all of the paint from bleeding extra. It should last longer outside as you go through. Now, to really make sure you're getting some crisp lines or solid lines, like I said, you have 16 ounces of paint. Feel free to use up as much of that as you can to help with your design. You can see the difference of where I used a lot of paint versus a little paint over here. And I'm going to leave it that way so you guys can see it later on. I'm going to go ahead and just continue on. I like the foam brush personally. That's just my opinion. You can, like I said, use the other brush, the hard bristle one, if you would like. Let's talk about things that you might want to consider when doing this project prior to fair. Okay, this project, when a judge is looking at it, if you're entering it as like a floor covering, they're looking at how good did you do painting it. Are the lines crisp? Are your colors pretty visible, like you're not blending and getting a bunch of like lines crossed over into another place that they're not supposed to be? Does the design make sense? Another thing I'm going to suggest is if you didn't tape your design down, that you are making sure it's not bunching up in places as you go. Now this cardboard, the poster board, like I said, is weatherproof sprayed. So it should hold up if you have a couple of different painting sessions. Just don't run it underwater to rinse anything off. What we have found is that vinyl is sometimes not sticky enough for it. So you go through. Now you'll also see I just kind of got a little bit of white in here. I know that I'm coming back through with green over top of that, so I'm not as worried. But I want to make sure that I am keeping clean, separate, crisp lines as I'm going. Alright, I'm going to take a quick pause and I'm going to come back when I'm ready for my next layer. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and do the next part. So I've went over everything a couple of times here. Definitely use as much of it as you can or you would want to. Now we're going to do the same process, except I'm just doing this with my second color. Now I am going to go ahead and just kind of go and run around my edges. And here you're going to be able to see that the more color you apply, the better it's going to look on the top. You want them to look a little bit more full. If it looks a little bit more sparse, you don't have as much paint in there, it's not going to look as good. We want it to look like it's covering completely. So again, I personally like using the foam brush. To me, it's just what I'm comfortable with. You can use the other brush, the stiff bristle brush. I just like the foam brush because I feel like in these little areas where they're close together, I have a little bit more control. I don't want it to bleed into each other, so that's just where I'm choosing to use what I'm using. And again, you can always come back over these a couple of times. And make sure too that you are paying attention to where your paint is and you're not dripping paint onto your rug where you don't want your paint. Remember, if you're entering these into fair, you want it about as perfect as possible. Now, you want it to look really nice, and the judge likes looking at things really nice. So the more clean it looks, the better it will do. And so then again, once I'm off my edges, I'm just adding as much paint in as possible. So like we said, you're gonna have 16 ounces of paint. If you want additional colors, you can. The paint you are getting is from Hobby Lobby if you want to match those colors. I don't think any of the main designs are going to really truly need anything more than what you got, so just in case. That is where those things came from. Now, you are also more than welcome to freehand if you wanted to get like a little squirt bottle of sorts and freehand a design on there. whether it be words or the flower design. Maybe you wanted to include some flower vines or leaves or whatever. You are more than welcome to freehand on there. Some people may not feel comfortable doing it. We joked in the office that I would be comfortable doing it, maybe not someone else. So it's really, oops, got a little bit too excited there. I think I saved it. I don't have any white, green on my white. So this is where it's going to be a lot of patience and making sure that you're being careful and not getting your colors into another color. I'm just kind of putting my finger down on my design on my board so it's not bleeding in there, and it's just sitting right on top. Remember when I said I like these foam brushes because I can get in these corners a little better. I don't have like the stray hairs. Alright. Looks like I got my first layer done over here. Okay, so then I'm going to keep going with each of my letters all the way across. And I will work on those and we'll join back in a little bit. Okay, so now we have everything painted. It took probably a good half an hour or so for me to get this painted. Now we want you to take your time. Some tips and tricks that I want to relay onto you. I did use up pretty much most all of my green. I still have a little bit of white. Now you can see in this line here, I didn't go super thick, and you can still see places behind that. I would highly suggest you're going to layer that paint on thick. It's going to look a little bit more like this. You can have complete coverage. Kind of the same thing over here on my dot. I have a lot more coverage than maybe some of my letters. Definitely use up as much of that paint as possible. You want a good solid thick layer when you are doing your letters and everything. You don't want it to be able to be seen through, and don't just say, well, it looks good enough. You want it to look really nice. So go ahead and add some of that extra paint. You have all that paint to use, you might as well use it. Another thing that I would suggest is going in as much as you can with like a fuller brush, because that's going to allow you to get more coverage than having to go back later on. You're also going to notice that the technique I use is more of a dab. I'm not swiping across and painting it like you would a regular, because that's just really going to tear up those fibers and they're going to get stuck in your brushes. So I would suggest doing some dabs, especially with sponge brushes. You get a lot of paint on there, so dab and kind of wiggle it back and forth and get some of that out. You can see the difference here where I covered it again versus my first layer. You want it to be full, you want it to be thick, you want it to see the entire line. Otherwise it's going to look a little more blotchy. And when you pull off your stencil, if you see some places you want to touch up, you can always do that too. So again, I'm kind of coming in and doing some daubing back and forth, just kind of filling in those little layers. I want a nice thick coat. All right, so we're gonna let that sit. We're gonna pretend that I have everything done. Eventually I'm gonna pull this off to reveal my final paint design. As you can see here, it's looking pretty good on this end, but I don't want to remove my stencil. So I want to leave it there. I'm going to touch it back up at the end. So let's really quick talk about classes in the Fairbus. So there's a couple of different places that you can go. We're going to immediately go to Design Decisions. So Design Decisions on page 88 and 89 is where it starts. You could enter this as on page 88, a floor covering. It says maybe woven, braided, painted, floor cloth, etc. May be exhibited as a poster or multimedia presentation. You can bring this in and you're good to go. You could, one thing I want to mention with design decisions, you will need to fill out the home design and restoration form and double check to make sure there's nothing in the front of the book. So things that you need to remember. These are items to decorate a home. No clothes, purses, note cards, scrapbooks, things like that. Accessories should be of high quality, so not just a quick, simple craft. You want to put some extra time and effort into these things. Items should show originality and creativity, so if you want to change these up a little bit, you can. And then be ready to display for the home. So we want this to be finished and sealed when it comes to the fair. You're going to fill out that supporting information, that 4-H design and restoration sheet, which you can find here in the office, and we're sending everyone home with one. So again, a floor covering. You could also use it we're going to skip past outdoor accessory. So C257025. We're going to skip past, which is also design decision, so same thing before. We're going to skip past these into Design My Place. You could use it as a simple accessory. In this case, Design My Place is still going to use that home design and restoration form, so you're going to have to fill out that with all the questions. Or if you wanted to, you could even do it as mixed media in Celebrate Arts. So a variety of different places to go with them. Reminder that you are going to want the home design and restoration form. Now, let's review. In your kit packet, you're going to receive your stencil, your paint, and your paint brushes. You're also going to receive the mat, and then your home design restoration form. These are all going to be things that could be entered on that on that Tuesday of Fair Week is when you're going to do that. Okay, so you're going to receive those items. The only thing you are not going to have in this is, of course, if you put your paint on like a paper plate or a tray. And the other thing you will not have with yours is that clear sealant that we will have at the office. So when it's done, dry, you're ready to seal it up, you can come here to the office and we will help you use that clear sealant to finish your design. Okay, and then we also talked about where they will go in the fair books. Now, if you have any questions between now and then on your project, feel free to reach out to the Extension office. Otherwise, we hope you have a wonderful time and a fun time. Remember to take your time as you complete your entry mat project. Thanks, guys.